Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamu te moana, hei huarahi ma tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa, huie, taiki e.
Taiki.
Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai e tēnei whiti kōrero I tēnei wā. Ko Makau, te maunga, ko Waiata, te awa, ko Omara Mutu, te marae, ko Ngāti Rū, te hapu, ko Whakatohia, te iwi, ko Graeme Storer, te ingoa. And hello, everybody. I'm Graeme Storer from the Inclusive Aotearoa Collective Tahono, and I'm the host for this, our third Community Voices webinar for 2022. For those of you who are streaming in live and perhaps not familiar with IACT, we were set up in 2019 with a view of thinking about how we can support belonging and inclusion in Aotearoa. Our vision is for a treaty-based future where everyone has a place to belong, where there's freedom to thrive, and where each person is included, accepted, and appreciated for their individuality. In short, where everybody can be the very best version of themselves. And that brings us to the theme of this particular webinar series, which is exploring the Māori concept of Tūrangawaewae. I'm going to leave it to the participants to talk about what that is and what that means for them. But in summary, a literal translation of Tūrangawaewae is a place to stand. And although the Tūrangawaewae is a Māori way of talking about belonging, we're finding in our work with diverse communities across the country that it is perhaps a more universal concept. And that's what we'll be exploring today in our meeting in this meeting with our panel. So let me introduce you to the panel. Our first panelist is Tahuia Bill Hamilton, who is a pōtikanga lead with the National Iwi Chairs Forum. I know that from talking with him that Bill's passionate about the 2040 vision that's been adopted by the Iwi Chairs. All whānau will achieve their full potential. It's this passion that drives his work in multiple arenas. Second, Fushia Tibble is Ngāti Porou descent, and she describes herself as a mukapuna of the east coast of the North Island. Fushia is here today representing Rangatahi Māori, and she's also a member of the pōtikanga facilitation team. Suveen Sanis Walgampola is the co-founder of Duality New Zealand. And Duality New Zealand is exploring some really interesting ideas about connecting people with their whakapapa and their genealogy, both in Sri Lanka and here in New Zealand where they've grown up. And our fourth panelist, Aram Aram was part of our AICT facilitation team and so is well known to us. He is, amongst other things, a long time and often fierce advocate in LGBTQI+ youth development spaces with minority and migrant communities. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for being with us here today. We really appreciate that you've taken the time out of your busy schedules. I'm going to hand off to you soon to just drive the talk. But quickly, here's what's going to happen. We have a set of questions. We'll go around and ask the questions, and you'll have a chance to answer and interact together. Towards the end, we'll be looking for some questions from people who are watching the live stream. If you are watching the live stream and you have questions you want to ask, please pop them into the chat and we'll gather them so that the participants can answer them. Bill, I'd like to start with you, please. I'd like to ask if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then address the first question. What is your Tūrangawaewae, or where is your Tūrangawaewae? Thanks, Bill.
Kia ora tātou katoa tautokunga mihi kia koutou kua tai mai ki te wānanga no reira tēnā koutou katoa. Tuatahi tēnei te mihi ati ki a koe Graeme, hei whakarite tō tātou nei hoi. E tika ana ki te hurihinga whakaaro ki ngā atua i te tīmatanga o tēnei o tātou mahi. Tuarua me maumahara mātou, te rangatira Moana Jackson e takoto mai e hinga nei I tērā wiki. No reira e te rangatira, moi mai I roto I te waka wairua, moi mai I te rangi Māori, no reira e te hoa, takoto mai. Haere. Koutou rā, ngā rangatira e hinga, Wira Gardner, June Jackson, rātou kia rātou, tātou kia tātou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai no tātou katoa. So thank you very much, Graeme. I te taho taku i matua, ko Ngāti Kahungunu, te iwi me Ngāti Raukawa, i te taho taku whaia, ko Ngā Rauru me Taranaki whānui o ku iwi. Nō reira, ko taku Tūrangawaewae, ko te marae o Rangiāhua, me o ngā roto me te ihu puku, me ko inei ngā tūranga mō taku kaupapa Māori, i te taho taku citizenship, ko te ika a Māui, tōku Tūrangawaewae. Nō reira, kia ora tātou katoa. So when I look at my Tūrangawaewae, I have 3 marae that I whakapapa to, and they're Rangiāhua and Kahungunu, o ngā roto and Ngāti Raukawa, and Te Hupuku and Ngā Rauru. And when I look at myself as being a citizen under my citizenship, I look at probably the North Island as being my Tūrangawaewae. It doesn't mean to say I can't stand the South Island, but I haven't lived there, so I don't have any affiliation really to, other than having mokopuna children down there. But certainly te ka Māui, I've have a number of places where that are part of my life experiences that enable me to choose there as my Tūrangawaewae.
In the conversation that we had last year with IACT, you talked about Tūrangawaewae as a standing place from where you gain authority to belong. Can you say just a little bit more about that, please?
I think the word authority is really important, because when you have a tūrangawaewae, it's probably the best word I can think of in the English language that talks about rights and responsibilities. And I think where our tūrangawaewae is, while we've got universal, we've got universal rights, where we belong, we probably have specific rights and responsibilities as well. You know, for example, when I look at my marae, I have a responsibility to make sure that my mokopuna know where their tūrangawaewae is. And that's quite a specific responsibility to those marae. I have a right also to stand there because of my pakeketanga and all of that sort of stuff, whereas I don't have a right to stand on other people's marae unless I'm invited to as manuhiri. So we have specific rights, and that's why the word authority is so important. The other point I really want to make is that tūrangawaewae is a really, really important concept, and it's directly related to te tiriti, because Māori had tūrangawaewae status here long before te tiriti, but what te tiriti did was it gave tauiwi a tūrangawaewae, or a right to belong, an authority to belong. And I won't go into the abuse that's been taken of it through colonisation, but it's, you know, still the notion of the treaty or te tiriti was to establish a new standing place for tauiwi, and the affirmation of the tūrangawaewae status that tangata whenua already had. I think if people can understand tūrangawaewae, they can actually understand who they are better and where they belong in this country. And if they can understand that more about themselves, then they could probably appreciate the tūrangawaewae status of other people. Because if we have the right, you know, to have the full suite of human rights, then we actually have to have the responsibility of respecting the full suite of human rights for other people as well. So, and that's why the word authority is so important, because there's always a reciprocity to rights, and that's responsibilities, and there's always a reciprocity to responsibility, and that's rights. So, and tūrangawaewae is quite an important concept for those reasons, I think.
Thanks, Bill. Fushia, I'd like to move on to you, please, and ask you the same question about what's your Tūrangawaewae, or where's your Tūrangawaewae? Thank
Kia ora,
you.
Graeme. Tērā te haia tata kriana mai ki runga o Hikurangi e rere waiapu ki te moana nui a kiwa pāoho tonu a Ngāti Porou ki te ao tūtonu mai koe maunga Hikurangi tuohu ko ngā uri e. Kia ora koutou. For this question about my Tūrangawaewae, I will immediately say that my Tūrangawaewae cannot be secluded to a place, although I whakapapa to te Tairāwhiti, the east coast of the North Island. I would be lying to myself if I said that my whānau actually is my Tūrangawaewae. And just to delve into the whakapapa of that, I do hail from te Tairāwhiti, kei reira a Hikurangi e Tuana, that is where my mountain in our motiata, in our waiata, we call it a steadfast mountain, a mountain that never moves. And at its peak, it cradles Nuku Taimimeha, the waka that held Maui as he pulled up Aotearoa, and has hosted my entire family, all of my family, my mum, my dad, has held all of them there all of these years. And it's a beautiful place, mind you. But my family's, its connections run deep into the soil. It doesn't matter where I am. So currently I'm sitting in Auckland, sitting on a lovely Albany at the moment, but my family is here with me. So this is my home. This is where I feel strongest. My family is the veins. I'm a biomedical student, so I think of everything in terms of science. My family is the veins that drag me back to the heart, where I'm constantly being replenished with my culture, with my reo, with my nannies and papas that have all the knowledge in the world, as well as many embarrassing kids stories. It is where I feel strongest. It is there, yeah. So therefore, I believe that Tūrangawaewae is it is dynamic. It doesn't have to be limited to its English definition, that is a place to stand, or that it's English immediate translation. It is something that is a complex thought. It cannot really be enclosed, enveloped by any simple definition. It is what is in your heart. And koena taku Tūrangawaewae taku whānau. So kia ora koutou.
Thank you. And you've touched on this a little bit more, but can you say just a little bit more about how it's important, or how it's been important to you as a young Māori woman?
Yes. So I hunu ka hau, I've gone through a few different school chains in pursuit of my love for science. I've moved to Auckland, which is for me, it is the greatest, biggest, furthest I could ever be from home. Only a mere 6-hour drive, but it's so very far. But simple things, that simple ability to connect. So I'm very grateful to be in the information age where I'm able to call my family and such. But in a education, so I am at the Auckland University. It is boasts many opportunities in Te Ao Pākehā. But it can also be quite isolating in itself. In my field, there aren't Māori don't make up a lot of the percentage in biomedical sciences or even the science field. So it can be quite lonely. But how I like to think of, again, referring back to my Tūrangawaewae, is I refer back to this beautiful whakatauaki by Tāpiranangata e Kiana. E tipu e rea mō ngā rā o tau ao, ko tō ringa ki ngā rā koa te Pākehā, hei ara mō tō tinana. Ko tō ngākau ki ngā taonga o tīpuna Māori, hei tikitiki mō tō māhuna. Ko tō wairua ki tō atua, nāna nei ngā mea katoa. So just for a translation, so grow up and thrive for the days that are destined to you. Your hands to the tools of the Pākehā to provide physical sustenance. Your heart to the treasures of your Māori ancestors as a diadem for your brow, a crown to sit upon your head. May your soul go to your God, to whom all things belong. And this is, I actually personify my Tūrangawaewae. I have a younger brother. I say that I am the ringa kua toro ki te ao Pākehā. I am the hand that's reached out to te ao Pākehā. In that I'm at university studying biomedical sciences, hoping to get into medical school soon. aiming to. And that knowledge that my brother, who is the prince of my family, is very much still in kura kaupapa. He's learning his reo. He knows he's learning the tikanga paha of my culture. So I know that I'm strong with him. But going back to me, being the hand reaching into Te Ao Pākehā, I'm filling my kete of Te Tai Rāwhiti with all of the knowledge that I can grab and take back home. And knowing that although I'm far away, I know that eventually the hand has to come back to the body and I will be with them again. And that knowledge, that that replenishment of the knowledge of I'm coming home is always strengthened me every single time I've gone home for the holidays, for every single event, any excuse, any birthday, any holiday of any variety. It keeps me going strong. So kia ora. I hope that answered your question.
That's the beautiful kōrero in there about replenishment and all sorts of other things. Suveen, I'm going to turn to you now, and really interested to hear about what you're doing in your organization, Duality, and in response to this question. So if you could first of all just introduce yourself and then talk about what is your Tūrangawaewae, or where is your Tūrangawaewae?
Yeah, kia ora e te whānau. So, ko Suveen Sanis Walgampola, toku ingoa, ko Mangafo te moanga, ko Waitamata te awa, ko Sri Lanka te whenua. So, my name is Suveen Sanis Walgampola. Mangafo, or Mount Eden, has its other name, I would say grounds me, has been grounded me for a long time now since I've been based in Tāmaki. Waitamata Harbour, particularly Tararua, Judges Bay, replenishes my wairoa. But then, of course, my homeland where I was born is Sri Lanka. So I guess a bit of the mahi that we do at Duality. So it started off as a little research that we did where we interviewed 100 Lankans who grew up in Aotearoa about their experiences and aspirations for their future. And what we found was that dual identity was a difficult aspect of navigation whilst growing up in Aotearoa. And it was only through getting more engrossed in Te Ao Māori, staying at the Orake Marae for a weekend, learning more about the importance of whakapapa, even reading the articles and books of the late Matua Moana Jackson. You gain that understanding of how you reconstruct Tūrangawaewae, or your place of belonging, when you come from a bloodline of colonial contexts within your homeland, and then you're navigating another colonial context where within a whenua that's nurturing your upbringing. So in terms of, for myself, it was like, okay, how do I honor what is essentially my whakapapa that I feel is that, you know, it was such a good point where the truth is your whakapapa. There's no denying it. Your bloodline, you know, it's on your skin, it's your DNA, the history that carries with you down those generations and the historical context that come with it. And understanding that. And then also understanding the whakapapa of the whenua as well. Now, in terms of that combination, has given me that positionality, and then overall, I think within Duality, we're finding that has really empowered us. As Matua Bill was mentioning, you know, it goes into belonging, goes into authority and empowerment of our community. And then what is our responsibility going forward as we navigate the space? Because when we land, obviously we're dominated by that Pākehā dominant framework, which defines us. We don't really have that authority. You know, we say, oh, you're good at cricket, you know, love your tea, oh, it's beautiful tourism. Oh, you're, you know, a doctor, engineer, accountant, professionalization. So it is about how do we navigate this without being defined and redefined just to fit within a colonial context. So that essentially is within duality, how we've grounded our complex tūrangawaewae. I know for me personally, picking up art forms such as gata or drumming, something, you know, learning our pre-colonial art forms, also learning and conversating more in areos. So there's a couple of languages that come from Lanka, so Tamil and Sinhalese. So for me, I'm Sinhalese, so attempting to, you know, get more into the songs and really understanding that context and history. And yeah, it has really given me that grounding of positionality in Aotearoa, what that navigation is forward in terms of the mahi that we do. Even in terms of the times of crisis that Sri Lanka finds itself at the moment, still using that framework that Matua Moana Jackson provided us, making sure whakapapa is at the heart of how we carry that mahi going forward. We've found ourselves to really create a really empowered community, a youth community here in Aotearoa. So really excited about how we navigate forward. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to you, Aram, please. So if you'd like to just introduce yourself and then talk about where is your Tūrangawaewae? You have a complex journey into New Zealand as well.
Kia ora, Graeme. Tēnā koutou katoa, tājaha. He uri tēnei no Taiwana, ko Shiba Jentan toku maunga, ko Taiwana toku moana, ko Huia toku awa, ko Shinto toku rohe. He tau mai a hau ki Aotearoa I te tau ko 1994, ko Whananaki toku whatu manua, e noho ana au ki tamaki makaurau, ko Aram toku ingoa. Ko tēnei takumihi ki ngā tangata whenua o te rohe nei, ka mihi hoki au ki ngā tohu o te rohe nei. Ki te waka tainui, ki te me ki te kei o waka o tainui, he piko he taniwha, he piko he taniwha, he taniwha rau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Yeah, it's just been listening to everybody's kōrero, and yeah, it's definitely a complex journey, and I'll be speaking for myself today in terms of the developments that we have done over the last few years through this space. You know, myself as an immigrant child who came here when I was 6 years old to Aotearoa, you know, there was a lot of assimilative practices at the time through schooling, through society, through racism, through everything else that really told you not to be you. And for me, I harbored that for many, many years growing up, not wanting to speak my own language, you know, having to go to university to pay thousands of dollars to learn from white people of my own language. But even that language was not my own language, because it's actually not a language my family actually speaks back home either, but it's a conduit of communication, you know. And I think going through that stages of learning and unlearning, it was a lot of unlearning. But I think one of the biggest part was actually learning, ko ai au, who am I? You know, what is my culture? What is my language? What is my people? And who are my people? Those were some of the biggest journeys that I had gone on when I was about 20, and had been going back to Taiwan ever since, every year, every couple of years, to make that connection with my whakapapa, with my whenua, with my people, and with my culture, to constantly be engaged, to be involved, but to continually learning from my elders as well around who am I and where I am from. And, you know, those are the identities that really, you know, for me, securing my place in this sense of, especially in the sense of what we're doing, you know, a part of my activism and advocacy work the last few years have been around Tahuia supporting tino rangatiratanga in Māori self-determination. And what does that look like in terms of us as Tahuia and our responsibility to this whenua, to the people, to the culture. You know, and I think for me, it took quite a while for me to really understand it, going through it for myself at the time, and undoing all of those, feeling it, feeling the anger as well. You know, there was a lot of anger that came out of it when I was exploring those, and sadness and grief. You know, that you know, embarrassment that I had held, you know, not wanting to associate myself, not wanting to be a part of my community. But now that's completely the other way around. You know, being in my community, being with my people, but my community is also the people that I make of and who I'm invited into the space, especially as well, you know, under the guidance and under the wings of where I'm working at the moment, Papatuanaku Kokore Marae. You know, there's also a sense of responsibility for me. And I think, you know, Matua Bill had spoken around the authority as part of the Tūrangawaewae. And, you know, for me, I've never quite had a sense of like, you know, the sense of, you know, this is the place that I truly belong. I think for me has always just been like, cool, if a call or action happens, you know, I'm down there, you know, if something's happening here, I'm supporting this kaupapa, you know, and, you know, that was something that, you know, as others have spoken before, we come from lands that ourselves have been colonized, or we have been the colonizers, and we are still in the fear of colonial power coming through our lands to take over with armed forces and to take away our identities, or shape and, you know, transform our identities that's not wholly our own. So, you know, these are some of the things that we still take on ourselves at the point. But I think, you know, for me, you know, one place that really has always spoken true to my senses, you know, being whāngai to Māori, Māori whānau as well, up at Whananaki, that has always been a place of solace for me. But in terms of authority, you know, what I do at the marae, for me, it's not so much authority, but it's also the continual mentorship, but also the responsibility as a Tahuia for other Tahuia who come on site on what is tikanga, what is all some of the processes that I myself can guide some of them through as well, and the rights and responsibility, especially under Te Tiriti. What does that look like? So yeah, I'll just stop there for now because I'll keep talking.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, one of the things that we were talking about a little bit before we started this afternoon was, you know, what kinds of words people use to talk about Tūrangawaewae in different cultures and different languages. So I'm just going to ask you if you maybe could think about in Chinese, or when you go back home to Taiwan, what are the words that people use when they're speaking about Tūrangawaewae? Or, you know, what is the word that's used, the concept that's used for that belonging?
Yeah, I mean, Taiwan's a very hot political place, eh? You know, and I think in my journey as myself going through, and you know, even when I was studying Te Reo course and doing my my pepeha and understanding my whakapapa and genealogy, you know, I think we have been in Taiwan. There's a lot of displacement that has gone on through many generations. I can't think of at the top of my head at the moment a particular word, but I think the essence of home, and I think sometimes for me, you know, my land, my whenua has this, you know, that sonar system sometimes, you know, that it calls me back, you know, after about a couple of years, I get a bit itchy foot that I must go home and I must go and pay tribute or respect to my elders, or to go visit the you know, my nannies, my father who had passed, and all the people of my land, and reconnect and recenter myself. So I think it's that honing system for me, that when I for me, the only word that I can think of is ja, which is home, you know, for me. And, you know, that incorporates a collective of, you know, my wider whānau, that weaves into who I am. Yeah.
Thank you.
Graeme, can I just make
Please.
a point here, because I think what we've heard there is the dynamism and the dynamism of tikanga, and you know the dynamism of how the tikanga around Tūrangawaewae changes. In 1840, you know, people would have been quite fixed in terms of where they would describe their Tūrangawaewae, and in fact probably their parents would have told them where their Tūrangawaewae was and all of that. But today, just listening to these responses from people here, we get a response that's a Tūrangawaewae is more than one place, and we also get a response that people here have taken the responsibility for identifying their Tūrangawaewae, whereas if they had a chat with their parents about it, they may have a different notion of it. So the point I was really making is just the dynamism of Tūrangawaewae. And I am quite interested to hear what some of the other words that people have for belonging or Tūrangawaewae that associate with, and then to have a look at the cultural imperatives around what, you know, how the word links, you know, like Aram's just talked about ja meaning home. So the concept of belonging is about home for as one sort of thing, and
also the relationship to family. So
all that stuff. Yeah,
a physical place per se, but I see the family, which in a way Fushia was also talking about in her kōrero. So, but let's try see if we can push Suveen into that corner and talk about a little bit about some of the words that you're using, say in Sinhalese, to speak to the concept of Tūrangawaewae.
Yeah, so when you're introducing yourself to someone new, often game or your village is often the main center of conversation. The family name would be brought up, and that's a very important aspect of your connection with others, essentially your connection with others within the village. So, you know, say if there is someone coming up to me, often in the Sinhalese community, be like, Mali game mogada, you know, and I'd say, oh yeah, my mum's village out in Ratnapura, Tātagi game, Medisa, like, and then it's like through that conversation, that belonging or connection is recognized, that you do have belonging and connection to different aspects of Lanka, right? As well as knowing the different villages within that your family might have connections to. Often a lot of people would live in the capital, in the economic capital, Colombo, right? Because that's where a lot of people would go to work. And then within even Colombo, people would be asking, you know, like, oh yeah, what suburbs? So your Tūrangawaewae is encompassing a lot of, okay, where is it that you live and work, often within the capital city, but also where your family whakapapas to outside of just that economic, political capital context.
I was sort of thinking about one of the things that people often say to me, you know, you come from Tūkaro and they say, oh, do you know so-and-so? And how we use that sort of thing around place and then narrow it down to sort of see what relationships and connections we have inside that space.
Exactly, yeah.
Fushia, are there particular words that come to mind to you when you think about the concept of Tūrangawaewae, or icons, images?
Kia ora. I'm going to go back to my other whakatauaki by Awhira Nangata, because while my understanding of my mōhiotanga is that my Tūrangawaewae is my whānau, and that in itself are beautiful people. So with that kōrero being said, we have our many members of our family, and each have their hands and their arms, and we have our legs, the ones that support us. I want to say that all of my understanding and such is my own. I want to say that, but I know it's not true. It can never be true, because as I'm referring back to science now, and as Isaac Newton said, that if I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And that comes literally with my family being very tall, and I drew the short straw. So I'm very lucky that they were very tall. My great grandmother, her name was Whaia McClutchy. She was an amazing Ngāti Porou woman who spoke on the marae, and she so earned, she had the mana to do so. So with linking that to Tūrangawaewae, being able to, with Tūrangawaewae, being able to understand the whakapapa of where our strength comes from is just important in terms of Māori being able to feel supported in whatever areas that they may be, kei tāwāhi, kei ahitereiria, kei ngā motu katoa te ao, in all the different places of the world, knowing the whakapapa of where their strength comes from, because I see it as a place of strength, as a source of strength, is what enables us to be strong in our Māoritanga. So kia ora.
Kia ora. I'm just going to ask you, Bill, if you wanted to add to this idea of the words that people are using to speak to Tūrangawaewae, icons, images.
Well, I just want to probably just stress the importance of icons, which are the things that when you think of your Tūrangawaewae, they make your heart go pitter patter, I'm home. And, and I think we shouldn't underestimate how important those icons are to us feeling we belong. I know that, for example, when I spoke with a lot of people after the Christchurch earthquakes, when the cathedral disappeared, a lot of people felt that Christchurch wasn't the same home that they belonged to. So there was that feeling of loss, a massive feeling of loss, and a loss of identity, is not their Christchurch, not their Tūrangawaewae in the same way. And I'm not surprised that Fushia started off with ko hikarangi te maunga, because any Ngāti Porou would, that's where they start from. And ko hikarangi te maunga, ko waiapu te awa, and and in Wanganui they call, ko te awa, ko au te awa, and these icons are really, really important to identity. And Tūrangawaewae is really about who we are, not just where we belong, but who we are where we belong. And so I just wanted to just stress the importance of people, or valuing people's icons as that. And I just want to touch on colonization too, because colonization really is the tool that tries to destroy your identity. And, Moana always talked about going back to the doctrine of discovery, which is the 1400s, which gave white people the feeling of supremacy and dominance, that they were the only people who mattered. And we have in New Zealand, they brought the doctrine here, they implemented the doctrine here, and in many ways it still applies, because you don't only see white supremacy in the way that people behave, but you actually see it in the structures and the institutions, and it's sort of stronger than the behavior of individuals, but the structures and institutions give the individual permission to behave in that way. And so this is why I'm sort of a fan of constitutional transformation, which means we've got to, change the very structure of how we how Aotearoa is, and support the kōrero of Aram and Suveen about the importance of us really acknowledging rangatiratanga, or valuing, not just acknowledging, but valuing rangatiratanga, and all of the moves to self-determination. To be quite honest, I really would like to hear a lot more tauiwi speak out in support of self-determination, particularly our Pacific brothers and sisters, who probably, I'd like to hear more from them. We've got the Project Waitangi people, and they speak out, but I think there's a real opportunity for the people who feel that self-determination is really important for all New Zealanders, and particularly to getting it right in terms of rangatiratanga and mana motuhake. But we don't hear enough tauiwi speak out about it, to be quite honest. Maybe more so than they did 5 years ago, but still not enough. It still gives permission for people like David Seymour to play that game so he can get more votes next year and that sort of stuff, and then for people to actually listen to him.
There's a lot of political bandstanding going on, which is quite unhelpful, to say the least. But I mean, maybe that's just a segue to move into the next question, which is really, how do we do that? How do we bring about, expand these sorts of conversations so that we're actually reaching out to a larger audience and overcoming some of those obstacles that we're seeing, where people are stepping up and saying, "Oh, this is not the way we should be going. We're moving to an apartheid system," or something along those lines. So, is the Tūrangawaewae an entry point for us to actually start expanding those conversations? How do we reach out to the large majority of New Zealanders who are not part of this discussion? Would you like to kick off? Okay, Aram, go ahead. Come back to you, Fushia.
Yeah, I think in just reflection of the time, and this kōrero, and I just really want to acknowledge Mātua Bill for that challenge, and that is something that we have, some of us, especially my group, Asian Supporting Tūranga Tiratanga, when we had first started as a group, as an organising group, there was just the 6 of us, and then from that 6 of us, then it grew, and then it grew. But I think, just in my own reflection around that is that, we have to continually be fostering our next generation, but also that partnership, and also that mentorship that we have with others like Moana Jackson, who had graciously always, spent time with us, to walk and talk with us around, the knowledge that he had. And, it's, we were very blessed to have people such as himself and many others who had come through to give us some of those guiding pointers, so that we can keep going forward around tino rangatiratanga, and how do we support, self-determination. I think, a huge part of it in that journey, especially for me, was the understanding of myself. How do I understand myself more, and to strip away those assimilation, forces that's being put on top of us, so that we can truly be authentic to ourselves as well in this relationship with Māori too. So these are some of the things that, I have perceived in terms of, that guidance, that we have, that's been given to us, but also the guidance that we as guiding people for our next generations as well, and walking them through. And that's been a huge key player in some of our developments. So just a little bit about what we've, done in the past. Yeah, that's worked.
Yeah, I just want to talk about what you're saying about the Asian supporting Tino Rangatiratanga, because I think really active group and really actually leading the way. I think there's a lot for many of the Pākehā groups to learn from that experience. But Fushia, over to you, please.
Kia ora mō tō kōrero, Aram. I do believe that spaces like these, how we're having our kōrero and mainstreaming them, making them accessible to everyone, it's so important. As with everything, it needs to be made accessible to the greater public. In the education systems, for example, what we see is, especially with Māori, you know, where we are putting out more opportunities to make Māori have more access to education. But the only problem with universities and such is that once you get in, it's almost clicky in that you're then enveloped by the university, and the knowledge actually doesn't get out. It's actually Māori who bring that information back to our communities. And well, what I don't want to see is our other cultures that we are blessed with having come into our beautiful Aotearoa. What I don't want to see is them being incorporated into the Kiwi culture in New Zealand. I don't want our Tahuia voices to be stripped and washed and carved into fit into a little spot. So I think that more conversations like with Māori, like the conversations that have been had with Māori communities and stuff, although I would like to see more progress there as well, seeing more effect than conversations. I think there needs to be a whole lot more consultation with these community groups to actually understand again what their aspirations are, then being able to develop actions and methods on how to do those with them, involving them in the conversation. I think that although we shouldn't have needed to, the pathway that Māori have paved in terms of regaining reclaiming our mana that we already had, but mana whenua and all that sort of thing, I think that we have paved an awesome pathway for our other cultures to come through on and actually have an easier time. Like, again, referring back to that saying about if I've seen further, it is from standing on the shoulders of giants. So yeah, ultimately, I do think that it's down to going back to Te Tiriti, honouring the agreement that was made with our tipuna, with us, the Indigenous peoples, because I do am so for our fellow other cultures, but I do have to ask that how can we support them if our culture, the Indigenous peoples, how can we support them if we aren't in ourselves supported? How can we give space to them if the spaces that we're given are already so limited, you know? Yeah. I don't mean to end on a question. It's just once we start answering it, then we can definitely make way for them. It's like, yeah, pathway behind us. I'm all for it.
And if I could comment, I mean, I think that's actually a really good question to end on, because I know in my conversations that I've had with lots of more recent migrants into New Zealand is sort of trying to find space, because it's very much about, well, one of them said that the Pākehā is just taking up too much space and taking all the air out of the room, and they just find it difficult to get into this conversation. And that's why it's really inspiring, for example, to hear some of the work that's been happening with duality or through Asians supporting rangatiratanga. Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, because like I mean, sorry for the background noise. But just with past integration of Māori culture and their family dynamics and stuff, there was that whole I think it was called peppering, in that Pacifica Māori and Pākehā communities were all mixed together, and thus relationships have actually lasted within those communities that were developed. So it goes to show that I'm not saying not including Pākehā, but our Indigenous cultures, we are so aware of the overlap in our values and such. So we are so welcoming. We can be so welcoming. I don't mean to speak for everyone. As a concept, I do believe that Māori we are welcoming people. But I think that if they are given space, they will thrive. That others will thrive alongside us. But first, we need to actually be able to find the space in our systems. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. May I just quickly add what Fushia had just said? I think, you know, that's really beautiful, is the opening of us as being migrants, being able to be here. And I think the responsibility is totally on us in the sense that whilst we are trying to maintain ourselves so that we're not absorbed into a monocultural system once again, but we're not an adversary to Māori. We are not an adversary to Māori for resources, for identity, you know, and that's where a lot of that comes through, is this, you know, working with migrants as well, is that we are not opposing, but we're in harmony, we are supporting. And I think that's the kōrero that needs to keep fostering and keep building, that, you know, the same system is trying to take it away from us, the same system. And actually, we also need to recognise that for our Indigenous whānau brothers and sisters as well, you know, to have that further deeper understanding and meaningful engagement as well. Yeah, so, you know, that's, all I wanted to add on to.
So we're almost running out of time. Suveen, please, last comment from you.
I think what I can finish on is, especially when it comes to tauiwi, advocacy or solidarity, you know, often when we're advocating for tauiwi or migrant sovereignty, I feel there needs to be a recognition there is no migrant sovereignty without the sovereignty of tangata whenua first. And that's the principle that needs to have that grounding. And if it's not grounded in that way, you're basically going back into those colonial contexts that have created the issues that we see for us. Because it's only when I started learning a little bit more about Te Ao Māori, and it takes time, like Matua Bill mentioned, it's slow, but the assimilation is so deep, it's generations, and the damage that has caused intergenerationally is massive. And to strip that away, as Aram mentioned, and to give that that work that we need to do ourselves before we go out into our communities and see who resonates with the kaupapa that we might have. It takes a lot of time, to be honest, and it is a slow process, but you know, conversations like this, making sure that we continue to have that kōrero. But once again, you know, with any kind of migrant sovereignty without tino rangatiratanga first, you know, standing, you know, for the sovereignty of Māori people, like tangata whenua, and, you know, knowing what should be at the forefront of this whenua, who holds the mana of this whenua, needs to be recognised across. Kia ora.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation has started talking about what we mean by, or how we understand where our tūrangawaewae is. We've got to some of the things and the whys underneath that, and some of the words that we use to talk about that. But we're actually really having a conversation now about how we unlearn some of these things from the past and avoid this assimilation and unpack colonialization. I'm inspired by the three of you younger people. Bill and I are in the Pakeki group over on the side here now, but I'm really inspired by the three of you and the work that you're doing. And we need to get it out and let more people hear what it is that you've got to say. So I'm going to actually ask Bill just to say something to close us off as a last thing, perhaps. Give us an impression of this day, and then we'll finish with a karakia.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Graham's just said about the privilege of being amongst you young people who are so articulate and ngākau mahaki and big of heart and that. So ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I just there are two things really that I've found in my duty when I've met with communities about their concern about the te tiriti being given effect. One is fear. And so I think a big thing we have to do is remove fear. And I think these, because, and the fear comes because people don't think the treaty belongs to them. They think it's a Māori treaty. And once people understand Tūrangawaewae, they can see the relevance of the treaty to themselves. And the second is ignorance. You know, only about 30% of New Zealanders actually have a little or a lot of knowledge about te tiriti. 70% of them don't. They don't know much about it at all. And yet 100% of New Zealanders have got an opinion about it. And so we've got to have that, we've got to, you know, get rid of fear and get rid of ignorance by having wānanga like this that will help do that. So ka nui te mihi ati kia koe, Graeme, hei whakahaere tō tātou nei hoi, koutou rā ngā kai kōrero o te wānei, tēnā tāra katoa.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time and thank you for the treasures. I had some notes to summarize, but there's too much for me to absorb out of all of that. But really, this has been a fabulous session. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you so much. It's going to add richness to our own work. As a closing karakia, ka whakaere te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakatā ai, kia turuki whakatā ai, homie, Huia, taiki e.